All right, welcome back to Vendetta Sports Media's NBA preseason previews. I'm Jared Prosser. I'm here with Jackson Law, and today, Jackson, we are talking Washington Wizards.
Yeah, and they pulled off some magic this past offseason, which we'll get into that here shortly. But
I'm assuming, just to stop you there, I'm assuming you don't mean Orlando Magic, as in they were a really average team that nobody cared about for 5 years.
oh well, I mean, yes and no to that question.
Sorry,
They did
I'm all for the Orlando slander.
no, but I mean they did make the playoffs last year. They were 34-38, good enough for the eighth seed out west, and they win a play-in game, so they were able to hang on to the eighth seed, and lost 4-1. Which was actually kind of closer than what that would say. They played Philly kind of close a couple of those losses, but eventually lost 4-1 in the first round. The Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal experiment ended in kind of a whimper, but then also in an explosion in the offseason. The biggest downfall of this team last season was their defense. They were arguably the worst defense in the entire league. They were
A
last.
Vendetta Select 5 could have hung 100 on them.
Yeah, they were dead last in points allowed. They were 30th in points allowed in the NBA and 28th in field goals allowed. You're not winning a whole lot of basketball games if you are the worst defensive team in the league. The reason why they were even in a position to make the playoffs was because they had the number 3 offense. They scored the third most points, 116 points per game. That's crazy. They have a top 5 offense, but the worst defense in the league.
And amazingly, they did it with Beal missing time, with Westbrook missing time, with Westbrook, not really getting into gear until late in the season, and Davis Bertans having a really poor shooting year, and they were still third in the league.
Exactly, and because of his terrible Bertan's terrible year, people were questioning giving him the big extension that Washington gave him last offseason. But this offseason,
yeah, there has been a lot of turnover this season. Let's run through that.
There has. So they helped instigate a 5-team trade. I've never seen a 5-team trade in the NBA before. It may have happened in the past, but not to my recollection, at least in my lifetime, I have not seen a 5-team trade. But they got a lot of return in that 5-team trade. So they shipped off Russell Westbrook to the Los Angeles Lakers. But in return, from Brooklyn, they end up getting Spencer Dinwiddie, which is huge.
Signing trade.
From the Pacers, they grab Aaron Holiday, who's probably not as good as the other Holidays, but is a solid NBA player. He'll probably be like 12th man.
He's a guy.
He's a guy.
He's a very good third string point guard.
Exactly. But then from the Lakers, they get Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Montrezl Harrell. Really filling out this roster with some vets, with guys that have won at a high level in the NBA, know a lot, played with LeBron. Spencer Dinwiddie from Brooklyn is the type of player that has kind of flown under the radar most of his career until he landed in Brooklyn, and then all of a sudden exploded onto the scene. And, Pistons fans, punching the air because they had Spencer Dinwiddie right there. They drafted him, and then they just let him go for nothing. And then he turns into a star in Brooklyn. In fact, Spencer Dinwiddie was so good for Brooklyn. He was really the one piece that they kept from the D'Angelo Russell Brooklyn era, when it looked like Brooklyn was on the rise, and then they blew it up so that way they can make room for KD and Kyrie to come in.
Jeez, you almost forget that D'Lo was in Brooklyn. I mean, he was an all-star in Brooklyn.
He was. That's
yeah, but it still feels like it didn't actually happen.
No,
it's a weird time for Brooklyn.
I know, but honestly, it was like for like the hardcore traditional NBA fans, it was like that Brooklyn team was a Brooklyn team I could root for because they had done everything right. They had crawled
Yes.
out of the shadows of the awful trade that had haunted them forever, where they missed out on so many star picks because they traded them all those picks to Boston, and they'd finally made some trades. They got some players and made the playoffs, and they look like this is a team that's moving up. D'Lo looks like a player that Magic Johnson always thought that or well, not Magic Johnson could think that he could be because Magic Johnson didn't believe in him too much, but that at least that the Lakers initially thought that D'Angelo Russell could be, and then now he's actually kind of taking a dip that he's in Minnesota. But
he's still good, but he's a one-way player.
Still good. But anyway, back to the Wizards, and again, some underrated moves that they did. Other moves, they acquired Daniel Gafford, who I have a soft spot for, former University of Arkansas Razorback, drafted by the Chicago Bulls. That's the second time the Chicago Bulls have drafted a big man out of Arkansas. Bobby Portis being the other one. Both of them kind of following a similar career path, if I remember correctly. I think Bobby Portis spent some time in Washington as well, and it may have even been his next destination after being a Chicago Bull. So, but I think Daniel Gafford, highly underrated pickup here. Good backup center. Good.
Go stick.
Oh man, guy can jump out of the gym. He'll definitely bring some electricity off the bench whenever he's out there. And then they went out and they drafted a sharpshooter in Cory Kisper, who I really liked.
Headband.
I'm not gonna lie. I really like Kispert coming out of college. I think he can fill in. I mean, he's kind of the next. He's a part of that line of like the Joe Harris, Duncan Robinson type of basketball skill tree, and I think it's gonna work perfectly in Washington, because he's the type of player that they're just gonna tell him to sit along the 3-point line, move along the 3-point line, and shoot threes, and that's what he's going to do. That's what he does best. He's going to shoot them at a high volume, and he's going to do it great.
Catch, shoot, every time. So this is probably one of the easiest questions I'll ask you through this whole series, Jackson, but who is Washington's key player?
Ryu Hachimura. No, it's Bradley Beal.
Yes,
it's Bradley Beal.
Hachimama.
No, it's Bradley Beal. It's Bradley Beal. 100%. It's Bradley Beal. This is kind of something that I was thinking about when I was making my notes. I feel like Bradley Beal has played at a superstar level, but doesn't get the superstar respect from NBA fans, and I guess it's just because he's on Washington. And Washington has been a sub 500 team for a couple years now.
Bradley Beal's girlfriend agrees with you 100%.
But I gotta hand it to him. He's loyal. He doesn't want to go anywhere, and he's been again playing at a superstar level. He's got to continue that if they want to make the playoffs. If they want to make any type of run, as much. As it is a lot of pressure, he's got to average almost 30 points a game for them to stay relevant. But he keeps doing it.
And he does it with, increased playmaking, decreasing defense. But
yes,
he's
that is a problem.
Not just he's turned himself from John Wall's sidekick shooter to a legitimate centerpiece of a very, very good offense. So with Beal as the key man, who steps in as your X factor, Jackson?
Well, we've talked about it already. It is team defense is the X factor here. It is awful. It is absolutely awful. Okay, just imagine if they could actually get a stop last season. How better of a team would this Wizards team have been? They were the 8th seed, for crying out loud. Like, granted, it's the East and you're a sub 500 team, and you're still making the playoffs as the 8th seed. I mean, the 7th seed was the Boston Celtics, and they were a 500 team. So that means the only above 500 teams to play out East were the 6th seed and above in the playoffs, which is kind of an insane stat when you look out West, where you could still finish above.
It's a bit of an indictment.
Yeah.
As much as the top end balance there in the East, that there's no depth.
No, whereas out West, you could finish like 3 to 4 games above 500 and still finish as the 11th seed.
Yes.
When it's all said, when the dust is settled. But they've got to play defense. Defense. Get down in a defensive stance. Do something. Take a charge, for goodness sakes. Okay? They've got to do something. They've got to figure it out defensively. And there was a stretch where they did kind of figure it out defensively last season, and they were winning some basketball games and making a final push into the playoffs. But then they forgot how to play defense again.
Well, I'm interested to see what happens with the coaching change. Scotty Brooks, he's not as bad a coach as what a lot of people think. He developed as a coach, but he's never really been able to construct, an NBA average level defense. So I'm interested to see what happens now with Wes Jr. in there, whether he can take this little island of misfit toys on the defensive end and turn them into something formidable, or at least something that has got more stopping power than a wet paper bag.
Yeah, and that was my thing to watch, thing to look out for Washington is just a new rookie head coach who don't know too much about his scheme. I know he spent a lot of years in the Washington organization as a scout, and then bounced around to some other teams, eventually making his return as their new head coach. But I mean, he's an unproven commodity when it comes to coaching, at least as a head coach in the NBA. And there's always pressure with that. There's pressure that comes with, you got a superstar in Bradley Beal who's getting older and says one thing, but we don't know how thin his patience is actually wearing underneath it all. There's a couple stars in the NBA where potentially could be getting that way. Damian Lillard. I gotta wait and see before I have any real feelings about this new coach.
So it is a nice story, though, considering it's been not that long since club legend Wes Unseld Sr. passed away, to see his son step in as the head coach. If nothing else, it's a bit of a tug at the heartstrings. Mm-hmm. But having said that, we saw that with Ryan Saunders in Minnesota, and it didn't really go well. So I am sincerely hoping it goes a lot better for Wes Unseld Jr. than it did for poor Ryan Saunders. What's something that you've earmarked, Jackson, as something for all of us as basketball watching public to look for with Washington? What's something that intrigues you with this team?
I mean, we talked about it. It's the coaching. It's the coaching. I think that's going to be key here. Is like you said, these guys played absolutely no defense whatsoever, and if they have any iota of defense in them, they'll be a good basketball team. I mean, just look at what Thibodeau did with the Knicks. He took pretty much the same Knicks roster and from one of the worst defensive teams in the league and made them one of the top defensive teams in the league. And that's why they had a playoff push. That's why they made the playoffs for the first time in what it seems forever. And why Knicks fans finally started crawling out of the woodworks to talk crap on Twitter is because their team was finally making the playoffs again. So they could talk trash. They felt like they could talk trash.
Yeah, and that lasted a while, didn't it?
Yeah, it lasted a little bit. They won game 2, and they said they wanted Brooklyn, and then Trae Young ended up becoming the villain of New York City. He is now the Joker, or Bane or whatever. Just take any Batman villain and slap it in there because it's New York City.
Well, let's put a nice little bow on all of this, Jackson. What's your prediction for how the Wizards go this season?
All right, this is going to be like the craziest prediction because of where Vegas has their win total. Vegas has their win total over under at 33.5. If I am a bettor, I am hammering the over here. I think they win around 40 games.
Wow.
I like the moves from the offseason. I think people are sleeping on this team because Westbrook's gone. Terrible, worst defense in the league last season, but I think they've got the pieces that can play together. Defense is still going to be a little shaky. Even the players that they got this offseason. Montrezl Harrell's a big, but he's a smaller big, and he's not really a defensive big. He's an offensive big. Kyle Kuzma is Kyle Kuzma. Take that as you wish.
That is 100% factually true. Kyle Kuzma is definitely Kyle Kuzma.
Spencer Dinwiddie, great offensive player. Have to see what he can bring to the table defensively.
especially after that injury.
Exactly. I mean, Aaron Holiday, defensive stopper. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Even
KCP.
Thomas Bryant coming back from his own knee injury, very good offensive center, but he's not anybody's idea of Hakeem
Exactly.
Olajuwon.
So I think that's going to be the key, but I'm going off the assumption that it can only get better from here, from last season. And if they can continue to have the offensive efficiency they had, which they're bringing it, like I said, they're bringing in a lot of new offensive players, and it's going to take some time for them all to mesh together, but they have the perfect melting tool, which is a superstar to rely on in Bradley Beal that can make everyone else more comfortable in their roles and in scoring because they know they're at least going to get 25 or more points that game from Bradley Beal, and Beal is going to keep it competitive early on in games to where everyone can get comfortable, find their rhythm, and someone else will step up as the number 2 and number 3 options in this offense. But like I said, they will at least hammer the over here for win total. So if you're betting on over unders for win totals, take the over with them. I'm going out on a limb and saying that they're going to be in the 40s. And I think they finish with having a 40 something overall record. They will at
Low
least
40s you're going with.
low
To be
40s.
clear. Yeah, you're not talking 48, 49 wins.
No,
You're
no, no,
going
no,
low.
no. I'm
Yeah.
talking like max would be 40. I think. I still think they finish sub 500 because I'm not like having that much faith in the defense. Okay, let's not get it twisted on that. I just think it could be a little bit better. I think if it's the 20th ranked defense in the league, if they still have a top 5 offense, that they could finish around the 40 win total just because of where they are out east. And if you get 40 wins, that's the 7th seed.
In the East, yeah. Well, if Rui Hachimura leads the team in usage, watch for the Wizards to win 60. But that will do us for this preview. You think I'm joking. That will do us for our Washington Wizards preview here at Vendetta Sports Media. It'll be on our website, vendettasportsmedia.com. It'll be all over our socials. This will be on YouTube as well. So hit subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. I'm Jared Prosser. That's Jackson Law. We'll see you for our next preview.